Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Meng-Wu lecture series. I have the distinguished honor of introducing a really amazing researcher, Dr. Barbara Fredrickson, who I've been a fan of for a very long time, so I feel like I know her. And of course, when I introduced myself, she was like, I've never met you before. But I just feel really grateful that we were able to host Barbara tonight at the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education. My name is Emma Seppa. I'm the Associate Director of the Center. And so in terms of Barbara Fredrickson, she has pioneered research on positive emotion. And as many of you probably know, there are many, many psychologists who have looked at more negative emotions like anxiety, depression, but few have looked at the positive side of emotion. And Barbara Fredrickson is really the pioneer in the field. And some of you have probably read her books, Positivity and Love 2.0. And if you haven't, you definitely should go pick them up immediately after the talk. And she's currently the distinguished professor of psychology at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And so she's traveled all this way to be with us. So we're really, really grateful. And please give a warm welcome to Dr. Fredrickson.
Thanks for coming out tonight. It's so good to see so many of you here. So I want to share with you where my research has been taking me, especially, I've been studying positive emotions for almost 20 years now. And at the very start, I was very interested in and focused on how positive emotions affect the individual, sort of how they change the way the brain works, how they change the way individuals grow over time. And in the last couple years, the data have been nudging me ever more closely to looking at how we co-experience positive emotions together with others in ways that bring us closer to understanding just what you might call the supreme emotions of love and compassion. So that's where the direction that I want to take you tonight. And the ideas that I'm going to share about the positive emotion of love are very compatible with, or I think of love and compassion as virtually the same. And compassion is love when you're also aware that suffering is in the mix. So a lot of times there's great opportunities to experience compassion, but I think of them as kind of on a continuum. You might feel sympathetic joy if you're aware that good fortune is in the mix, and compassion when you're aware that suffering is in the mix. But at the core of all of those might be these notions of love that I'd like to offer a perspective on love that describes it as positivity resonance, or resonance of positive emotions between people, between and among people. I want to give a shout out to my lab, the PEP lab at UNC. Actually, there's more members than this picture shows, but they are a tremendous group of young scientists and postdocs and staff that help me do the work that I'm going to share with you. And I also have the generous support from National Institutes of Health. I want to just give a thumbnail sketch of my broaden and build theory of positive emotions, because that is kind of the kernel of my new ideas about love and compassion. They stem from this model. And there are two core facts that we've been able to document about positive emotions more generally. And one is that they broaden our awareness. Positive emotions literally expand your peripheral vision. So whereas this water lily opens and closes with the presence and absence of sunlight, we know from brain imaging studies, eye tracking studies, behavioral studies that your mind opens and closes with the presence and absence of mild positive emotions. They don't need to be really intense positive emotions, just really subtle positive emotions literally change the way the brain works, allowing you to take in more information from the context that you're in. And this is a momentary effect of positive emotions. When you're feeling that uplifted state, then you have this broadened awareness. there's another part of the broaden and build theory which in a way is the answer to the question of so what? Why does this matter? Why does this momentary opening of awareness have consequences for us? And that's is that it's those an accumulation of moments of broadened awareness build our resources, change who we are, help us become better versions of ourselves. People become more resilient, more socially connected, and literally are on a trajectory of growth that helps us become better versions of ourselves. So those are the two pieces of the broaden and build theory. And it's the form of positive emotions is that they open us, and the function is that they improve us. And so a steady diet of positive emotions, like a steady diet of fruits and vegetables, is something that we need to be healthy and to grow. An offshoot of, or a segment of some of the work that we had done earlier on how positive emotions broaden awareness, focused on how positive emotions unlock our ability to attend to other people. When people are feeling kind of ordinary, or especially when they're feeling kind of negative, they walk around in a cocoon of self-absorption. You know, you bump into people, and then you realize, oh, there's somebody there. You know, but when people are feeling positive emotions, they connect and see others. They're more likely to recognize that they're not the only player on the stage, that there are other people in the room. And we've found that it leads to people thinking more in terms of we than in terms of me versus you. The way that this is studied in psychology is through a concept called inclusion of the other in the self. You're more likely to see your own experiences as overlapping and connected to another. And we've also found that when people are experiencing a steady diet of positive emotions, they're better able to take the perspective of others. So you're better able to step into somebody else's shoes and see things from their perspective. One of the earlier findings we had in this line, that positive emotions unlock other-focused thinking, really helped us see that positive emotions allow things that typically divide us, like race and cultural differences, to slip out of view, so that people are just as able to recognize someone of another race as they are to recognize someone of their same race. Now, the fact that people are better at recognizing people of their same race is a very well-documented and persistent phenomena. And we find that when people are experiencing a mild positive emotion, that race bias just disappears altogether. Temporarily, it's not a permanent change, but while people are feeling positive emotions, they're just as able to relate to somebody as an individual across racial lines. Now, one of the things, so we had found already that positive emotions in a way prime us to be able to connect with others. And that was kind of a springboard for some of my thinking on how we may co-experience positive emotions with others. So I'm going to take you towards some of this other work that has inspired me to rethink how we define love. Okay. Now, one of the things that I've learned in trying to speak about love from a scientific perspective is that it's kind of dangerous to do that, because everybody in this room has their own definition of love. Okay, you have it from your own hard-won experience, and you know, maybe it would be better for me to call this concept W or something. You know, just some generic phrase. But I think it's worthy of calling it love because we revere love. And love is, we know that love is an important concept, but maybe we've been wrong about exactly where love is, or what is the most important, the way I think of it as the tiny engine that drives love. Okay, so I'm looking at love from the perspective of emotion science, and I want to give you a new lens to appreciate how love works in your life and in your health. But as I do this, I need to clear the decks of what love is not, from the perspective that I'm going to try to offer. So I'm not saying you have to permanently change your views about what love is, but I just want you to set aside some of these beliefs just for the duration of this talk, and then as you leave the room, you can pick them back up again, and or meld them with these new ideas, or you make your own choice. But I want to be clear about what love is not from the perspective that I'm building up here. One, it's not the same as sexual desire. I study emotions from an evolutionary psychology perspective, and there was a time when positive emotions were just conflated with mating. And so positive emotions were thought of as, oh, that's what drives mating. Understood. Nothing more to study there. So I just want to say this is not about looking at love as sexual desire, or perhaps more challenging, love is not a special bond. Now, I'm not saying that love is not related to special bonds. It's just not synonymous with a special bond. Okay, as our job as research psychologists is to try to take apart a complex system and see what drives what. Okay, and so I'm arguing that love as an emotion is distinct from the special bonds you might have with your soulmate or your partner or your children or parents. And I'm also arguing that love is not the same as commitment. Commitment is a decision that can be informed by experiences of love, but it's not it's not synonymous with it. Maybe more challenging, love is not exclusive, love is not lasting. Okay, and in a moment I'll describe why I call those out as kind of myths about love. We like to think of love as something that we share with one special person, or something that we experience till death do us part. And I'm being intentionally provocative here. Love is not unconditional. Now, I'm using the word unconditional in a very particular way, and I'll explain that in a moment. But I just, from looking at love from an emotions science perspective, it's hard to argue that it arises no matter what, regardless of conditions. Okay, and just for emphasis here, just block these out. Okay. So where am I going with this? What I've been doing is doing a bit of a mashup between emotion science and relationship science. These are two areas of psychology, largely in personality and social psychology, and I'm merging them together and drawing what I think are really central key concepts from each. And from relationship science, there are two really critical views that I think are central to what love is. And one is based on this idea, an analysis of all different kinds of love relationships. Parental love, romantic love, compassionate friend love, looking at all different kinds of relationships that we call love relationships. Drilling down to their core, these researchers have argued that essential to those relationships is investment in the well-being of the other for his or her own sake. Now, we psychologists are very famous for having long jargon terms. Here I would just say, another way to say this is you care. You care about the other person. And you care about them not because they're going to make you breakfast in the morning, but because you're concerned about their welfare. Okay, so that concern for their welfare is a key central piece to every different kind of love relationship. And another key concept from the relationships literature is another jargon phrase called perceived responsiveness. Now, I translate this as you feel like the other person really gets you. You feel understood, validated, and cared for. So if you call this one care, this one is you feel cared for. You pair them together and you have mutual care. Okay, that in a love relationship, there's often a mutual sense of care. Now, sometimes people get tripped up about parents and children, and I think the care can be as simple. It's not caretaking. It could be as simple as if that parent were hurt, you'd be, oh my goodness, or or if that your physician was harmed in some way, and you really cared for your physician, they cared for you, you would be concerned. Okay, so it's not, it's as light as concern and care, not caretaking. So it's not a heavy, child parenting the parent kind of situation. Okay, two views from relationship science that I think are really critical, and yet I do think they also miss the boat in a couple places where emotion science can help out. Emotion science can add to the mix a focus on the biobehavioral components. Now, emotions are, by definition, a mind and body experience at the same time. And these particular takes on mutual care that come out of relationship science, they're kind of abstract. They're framed as sort of ideas we have, as opposed to embodied experiences. So emotion science can add a focus in on the body and the embodiment of love. And most critically, I think, it adds a momentary lens. Now, from relationship science, it almost seems as if, well, if you somehow have a love relationship, it's like a toggle switch. It's like you didn't have a relationship, now you have a relationship, and then it just continues on in that same way. That's, I think bonds may work that way, but I think love as a sense of mutual care, is something that we have to recognize as a momentary phenomenon. So even though I have a lifelong bond with my husband, right now he's in North Carolina, I have no idea what he's doing. He's probably putting the kids to bed. I'm not paying attention to what he's doing. He's not paying attention to what I'm doing. We're not engaged in a moment of mutual care. Okay, so a momentary lens recognizes that love can be a fleeting state that lasts for a micro moment or a succession of micro moments. And another thing emotion science can add is this broaden and build theoretical backdrop. And what that does is it points out that positive emotions have one effect in the moment, and then as we have a steady diet of them, we change and become different people. Okay, so that's what I mean by the broaden and build theoretical backdrop. Helps us see these micro moments of experience as nutrients that change who we are and change who we become. So the definition that I'm offering of what love is that it's an interpersonally situated experience that's marked by a momentary increase in three things: a shared positive emotional state. So I feel a positive emotion, you feel a positive emotion. They're not identical positive emotions, but they have a positivity to them. And so we're each at the same time about the same thing, feeling positive emotions. And there's a biobehavioral synchrony that emerges, and I'll give you details about what that entails in a moment. But this idea that in a way, we start to act as one. And that acting as one isn't just in terms of behaviors and gestures and postures kind of coming into sync, but it's also biological synchrony as well, in terms of biochemistries and neural firings and heart rhythms. And also mutual care. That's the behavioral orientation. Emotions tend to have an action tendency associated with them, or an action urge. The action urge here is a mutual care. You're inspired to attend in a caring way to the other, and they're inspired to attend in a caring way to you. And so here's the broaden and build piece. Over time, a steady diet of these micro moments of positivity resonance, or this shared positive emotion, biobehavioral synchrony, and mutual care, builds a sense of embodied rapport, or the sense that we really clicked, we really connected. Okay, that sense that there's some connection here. It also builds social bonds. So our social bonds are products of a steady diet of these shared positive states. And it also builds commitment, loyalty, and trust. Those things emerge from a steady diet or past history of shared positive emotions like this. So what I'm arguing is that love is this state in which positivity resonates across two people. Now, I'm actually, just for simplicity, I'm talking about two people here, but I think this could equally apply to small groups, large groups, in other ways, but it's a lot simpler in language just to keep talking about two. So I don't think it's limited to two, but it's perhaps most powerful with two. Now, I want to describe why I say love is not unconditional, because I don't think positivity resonance is unconditional. Okay, positivity resonance, for it to occur, requires a set of preconditions. So this is because these preconditions need to be in place, then positivity resonance doesn't emerge no matter what, regardless of conditions, and therefore it's unconditional. It's not unconditional, it's conditional. Okay, the first is that we need to feel safe. Now, this is perhaps one of the most poignant showstoppers for people experiencing positive emotions. We know that people who are chronically lonely, experiencing depression or social anxiety, they don't experience interpersonal interaction as safe. And so they'll pull back and not want to engage. And that's a bias. It's not an accurate portrayal of those social. They overjudge threat. They see more threat than there really is. Okay, so, but that seeing that threat is not just creating the psychological consequences of threat appraisals and negativity. It's closing the door to these growth-oriented positive emotional states. Now, a second precondition is connection. And this, by connection, I mean real-time sensory connection. Okay, that, so I have to word that carefully, but being co-present in a group would be one kind of connection. Making eye contact would be another. Touch would be another. Shared voice would be another. There's a real-time sensory information shared when you're talking to somebody on the phone. And the vocal tract carries so much information about emotions because you know, the shape of our vocal cords and is very influenced by emotional arousal levels and engagement and energy levels. Okay, so you can catch somebody's emotion over the phone, but if we use our phones with our thumbs, we're not going to be able to catch those emotions in the same way. And then there's not a real-time sharing. So connection is really vital, and I'll explain why in a moment, but in part because real-time sensory connection is what's required for my positive emotion to elicit more positive emotion from you, and then yours to elicit more from me, and it then resonates back and forth, and it kind of grows for a little bit. Okay, that's what I'm talking about, this building and incremental stretching of positive emotions between people. Okay, so I want to give you some of the science that leads me to make this, to offer this different view of love. And one piece of the science, a piece of the puzzle that drew me in this direction, is the fact that smiles draw attention more than any other facial expression. Some earlier work suggested that it was angry faces that pop out, and there's certainly individual differences in this. Some people will only see the angry faces, but on the whole, on average, positive emotions are what pop out in the environment, and smiles draw our attention. And when they do, when we make eye contact with somebody who is smiling, we mimic that smile. But this is work that's really interesting. This is work done with facial EMG, so little sensors on people's faces to pick up the muscle activity movement. And this was done with avatars. Let's see. This top row are all expressing a mild happiness. They got a mild smile. These are all neutral, and these are all angry. They're trying to equate the intensity, and so they don't have the mouth open for the smiles. And these two avatars are looking straight out, making eye contact with the research participants, and whereas these are gaze averted. And what these researchers found was that when the gaze is averted, there's no facial mimicry. Okay, so eye contact is a gatekeeper for facial mimicry. Okay, and I've been very inspired here by Paula Niedenthal's work on what she calls the simulation of smiles model. And she argues that, there are many, many different kinds of smiles. Paul Ekman has argued that there's maybe 50 types of smiles. And so some smiles are genuine affiliative bids. Others are kind of domineering smiles. Some of them are gloating smiles. Some of them are just plain fake smiles. So what she has argued is that people are actually pretty good at detecting all these subtle differences between smiles if they make eye contact. Because if you make eye contact, your brain simulates what's going on in their brain, which informs your gut. What did it feel like to smile like that? So if someone makes a domineering smile, you subtly mimic a domineering smile, and you kind of feel it in your gut. Oh yeah, that's not a pretty, that's not a connect with me smile. But she's done work to show that if you cut off people's ability to mimic another person's face, then your ability to decode what their facial expression means, just plummets. Okay. So part of our gut wisdom of knowing what other people feel is because we make eye contact, our brains kind of simulate what's going on in their mind, their brain, and that informs our gut, and we know we're sort of co-feeling something, and then we can judge whether it's a genuine positive affiliative warmth or not. I want to show you a little bit more about different aspects of synchrony. And we know we've seen synchrony in the animal world. Birds and fish do things in sort of all in the same manner. People do it too. This is an image from a laboratory study in my lab. One of my former doctoral students, Tanya Vecharkal-Semsek, did this early work as part of her master's thesis, where we had people coming into the lab and having a get-to-know-you conversation. And we found that above and beyond any good feeling that they had in getting to know the other person, the extent to which they started to show behavioral synchrony, their gestures were moving in the same way. Above and beyond positive emotions, this behavioral synchrony predicted their later reports of, oh, we really clicked. We really understood each other. Okay, so behavioral synchrony is really important there. There's research to show that when parents and their babies are engaged in, this really lovely dance of engagement and positive engagement, that there is an oxytocin synchrony that occurs there, that the parent's oxytocin changes and the infant's oxytocin changes in synchrony. And this, they've found, happens for both babies and mothers and babies and fathers. Okay, so it's not, an oxytocin has often been described as the love hormone or the bonding hormone. It's more than a hormone, it's a neuropeptide, but it's connected to forming bonds. So we used to think oxytocin was just released in those really major moments like lactation and childbirth and sexual intercourse. Now we know that in just, everyday face-to-face exchanges, oxytocin increases and increases in synchrony. And I've also been really taken by work by neuroscientist Uri Hassan at Princeton University, who has looked at neural synchrony in conversation. So as somebody is telling a very circuitous story with lots of emotional ups and downs, and other people are listening to that same story, their brains show kind of a whole brain synchrony. It's not in some isolated mirror neuron location, but it's like whole widespread across the brain. So much so that he's argued that speaking and listening or communication is a single act performed by two brains. It's not something that speaking is related to one kind of brain activity and listening another. That when you're really following each other, your brains are kind of doing the same thing. And so one way to think of this is that love is this mini mind meld moment. But Spock, not being fully human, gets his information about how another person is feeling without eye contact and without positive emotions. So we may need to make eye contact and be more expressive and show more warmth to others to get the same kind of information that he has. So what I'm arguing here is that positivity sometimes resonates across people in ways that amplifies that positivity for a little bit, and then it dissipates, okay? Emotions are like waves. They kind of build up and dissipate over time, and sometimes that wave of an emotion is rolling across two brains and bodies at once. Okay, creating a really remarkable biobehavioral synchrony that's showing up in neural patterns, is often unlocked by eye contact. I don't think eye contact is the only gateway to this, but it's a really powerful one. And there can be a synchrony in heart rhythms too, when people are really empathically engaged with one another. Now, my son saw me preparing the slides for this, and he said, "Why is one person's head bigger than the other person's?" And I said, "Oh, this is like a parent and a child. This is the image I was able to find." And he's like, "Well, you better clear up that it's a parent and a child, because people might think positivity resonance makes one person's head bigger." So that's not what I'm saying. So now that we have that straightened out, what I've been very curious about is that given how readily we catch each other's positive emotions in ways that allow us to, in a way, be feeling the same and having a very tightly choreographed biobehavioral synchrony unfold across two bodies and brains at once, is that a more powerful positive emotional state than other positive emotional states? Is that the real driver of some of the health benefits of positive emotions? And in a way, like, there's some foods that have great nutrition and others that are superfoods that have an extraordinary amount of nutrition for their bodies. So maybe that's a possible analogy here. Is positivity resonance more potent in terms of its effect on our health and well-being than positivity? And by this, I'm not saying that positivity is chopped liver. I spent 20 years showing that positivity does good things for individuals, but maybe positivity resonance is another level up. So the kind of research that I've been doing to test these ideas actually are to test the build part of the Broaden and build theory requires that we get out of these one-time visit laboratory studies and do interventions where we change people's habitual positive emotions. It's like we're trying to change trait positive emotionality, and that's not something that's you can just decide, oh, on Tuesday I'm going to start having more positive emotions in my life. It's something that requires effort and impulse control and lifestyle change. And I liken it to moving a river in that it's more possible than moving a mountain, but it's not something that you do without continual reinforcement and continual effort. And the best research in positive psychology suggests that you can change trait positive emotionality, but it takes as much effort and impulse control as does lowering your weight or lowering your cholesterol or losing weight. So the path that my research lab has taken towards this is by studying loving kindness meditation, particular ancient meditation technique. And I have to tell you, in having studied loving kindness meditation, that is also a big influence in getting me to rethink what love is. So it's definitely no coincidence here. But my work on loving kindness meditation predated this, but it's kind of, again, been another strand that kind of pushed me to rethink what love is. And our studies show that taking on a regular practice of loving kindness meditation. This is a study where we randomly assigned some 200 employees at a computer company in Detroit, CompuWare. They're happy to have me say who they are. We randomly assigned people to learn loving kindness meditation or not. This was an early study where it was a waitlist control group. And our current studies, we compare learning mindfulness meditation to learning loving kindness meditation. So we'll be able to make predictions about what is it about this kind of meditation in particular distinct from other kinds of meditation. And we find, this is the slide that I've often called the move the river slide, because people in the meditation group, here it was loving kindness meditation, showed a subtle increase in their positive emotions across a couple of months of this study. And it's not a really big change. I think that's really important to recognize. These people aren't going from like the most depressed and anxious people on the block to the happy-go-lucky ones on the block. They just increased their experience of positive emotions a little bit. So it's not like you're looking to make a radical change, but if you make a small change, that small change has big ripple effects. What we found in our earlier work is that people they build their cognitive resources. They become more mindful. They're better able to savor their positive experiences. They report having warmer and closer relations with others, that their relationships have improved. They increase in environmental mastery, which has been taken to be a marker of resilience. Like you're able to deal with whatever situation comes your way. And in our first study, we found that people's self-reports of aches, pains, colds, flus dropped significantly, that in ways that were predicted by that subtle upward shift in positive emotions. Now, in our more recent work, we've wanted to really look closely at the connection between the improvement in relationships and the improvement in health, and in particular to try to get objective measures of health. And so we've been very interested in the functioning of the vagus nerve. Now, your vagus nerve is your 10th cranial nerve. It emerges from your brainstem, and it tethers your brain to your heart and then runs on to other internal organs. And one of its jobs is to calm your racing heart after a fright. But when it's functioning really well, it also slows your heart rate a little bit each time you exhale, creating a healthy variability in your heart rate. And it's very simple to measure this. It's a non-invasive measure. We measure both respiration and ECG, or heart rate, and we look for the shortest interbeat interval while people are breathing in compared to the longest when they're breathing out. And you look at that variability in heart rate associated with breathing, and it can and you control for certain other aspects, and you can use that as a measure of cardiac vagal tone. And cardiac vagal tone is sort of a caricaturological, a description of how well your vagus nerve is functioning. And it's an important measure, both in terms of physical health and in terms of psychological well-being. In terms of physical health, people with high vagal tone, high cardiac vagal tone, are less likely to have a heart attack. Their bodies are better able to regulate glucose and inflammation. Okay, so it predicts better physical health in a number of domains. And at a psychological level, people with higher vagal tone have been found to be better able to regulate their attention, better able to regulate their emotions, and it's thought because of that, they have better social skill. So it's been called out as key to the social engagement system. And so we thought that it would be one way in which loving kindness meditation, which is very oriented towards social engagement, might influence physical health. So it seemed to be sort of like bridging those two areas of experience. Okay, and one of the things that we found was in keeping with the previous research, we found that people with higher levels of cardiac vagal tone walk around their life experiencing more micro moments of positivity resonance, reporting that their connections with people today felt more close and felt more attuned. And so that's in keeping with the finding that better social skill. But what we also found was that the more of these micro moments of positivity resonance people had, the more their cardiac vagal tone improved. Now, this is really important because scientists used to think that cardiac vagal tone was largely stable, kind of like your height once you're an adult. And so here we're able to show that a diet of positive emotional experiences is predicting improvements in cardiac vagal tone. And we've looked at this experimentally as well, where we randomly assign people to learn loving kindness meditation or not. And I don't think the people in our control group are always sitting around just not doing anything like that. But that's the image I use for the control group, the waitlist control. And that we've predicted increases people's day-to-day experiences of positive emotions. These aren't necessarily shared positive emotions, but they're reports of all kinds of positive emotions. And that increases their likelihood of experiencing positivity resonance with others. Okay? That they walk around with more positive emotions as individuals, and then when they connect with other people, they're more likely to see those connections as warm, engaged. And we think it's those positivity resonance moments that predict the improvement in cardiac vagal tone. And we have a very elaborate statistical model that supports that this is the pathway through which it works. Like this is an upward spiral between positive emotions, positivity resonance, and cardiac vagal tone, and we can kind of budge that upward spiral by, or kind of nudge it to be going on a faster upward spiral if we introduce loving kindness meditation. So another way to say this is that love creates health and health creates love. Because also another thing that we found, there's kind of two arrows going in predicting people's likelihood of experiencing positive emotions and positivity resonance. People who start off with higher levels of cardiac vagal tone get the most out of the meditation and then are kind of on a faster upward spiral. Now, so one thing that we've found is that if you start with high cardiac vagal tone, you actually show more improvement in cardiac vagal tone with loving kindness meditation. And you basically are better equipped to get more positive emotion yield out of that behavioral change. But we've got another intervention that's I call it an equal opportunity intervention, in that it's something that works for people who start with high or low vagal tone. And this is one where we had discovered that when we started asking people on a daily basis about how connected and attuned and close they felt with others, that was the first time that we'd seen in our studies an upward drift in positive emotions, even in those in the control group. And so we realized that there might be something psychoactive about this thought of reflecting on connection on a daily basis. And so one of my recent doctoral students, Bethany Cook, for her dissertation, did a randomized control study where we randomly assigned people to either reflect on connection or savor positivity resonance by thinking about their 3 longest social interactions of the day and thinking of them as a set, rating how close did you feel to the others you were with? How attuned did you feel? And that's simply asking yourself and answering that question every night for 7 weeks led to increases in daily experiences of positive emotion and improvements in cardiac vagal tone. The control group reflected on their 3 longest work activities and how productive and efficient they felt, or how important and efficient they felt. So they were equally doing a day review, but that didn't make people feel better and it didn't improve their vagal tone. So I want to tell you a little bit about what's next for us. And I'm collaborating now with Steve Cole, who is one of the leading experts in looking at working in this area called social genomics. And we're looking at gene expression profiles, especially in the immune system, and aspects of the immune system related to inflammation. And what he has found in much of his past work is that adversity of all kinds, leaves a particular fingerprint in gene expression in ways that set people up for inflammatory-based illnesses. And so it's able to begin to open up that black box between stress and adversity and poor health outcomes, and really see what's happening at a cellular level that supports that. So I actually went to graduate school here at Stanford with Steve, like more than a few years ago. And we lost track of each other for decades or more. But I heard him present at a meeting about 3 or 4 years ago, and noticed that he was using language exactly the way that I had written in Positivity about how we should be mindful of what our daily diet of positive emotions are, because it's going to change who we are next season. Because we'd already seen that it built people's resources, changed who they are. And he was saying, we got to be careful about the negative emotions we experience because it's going to change you at a cellular level next season. And so after that, this was a talk to about 1,000 people in a room. I sent him a text afterwards, like, remember me? We went to graduate school together. And I said, do you ever want to study this on the positive side and look at it experimentally? And he was super excited, right on board. Within a couple of weeks, we were writing a grant proposal together and got some work funded that allow us to look at the effects of learning loving kindness meditation or mindfulness meditation at a cellular level. How is that changing people at a cellular level, especially, again, in these areas of the immune system that are related to inflammation? We've got some very promising cross-sectional work that was just published this summer in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences that suggests that certain kinds of well-being are related to different gene expression profiles. So the work is beginning to look very promising that we'll be able to see the effects of these interventions at a cellular level as well. So just before wrapping up, I want to just share with you what these different ideas about positivity resonance get me to think about what is the evolved evolutionary purpose of a smile. Okay, and I'm going to walk you through kind of the history of thinking about what a smile is for. Paul Ekman has argued that what a smile does, or any facial expression, it's a readout of what the person who's smiling is feeling. Okay, that the smile is broadcasting an inner state. Some other researchers kind of turned that on its head and said, well, the real function of a smile is not that it's expressing positivity, it's that it evokes positivity from people who witness that smile. Okay, that's what really matters, is that smiles are emotion triggers, not just emotion reflectors. And from Paula Niedenthal's work with the simulation of smiles model, you can argue that, well, a shared smile creates this cognitive tuning that allows you to know what the other person is feeling. And here I'm talking about when I say what's a smile for, I'm limiting the analysis to the sincere affiliative bids of all the different kinds of smiles. That's the kind of smile I'm talking about here. And then there's some work that combines this Bakarowski and Oren view that smiles and laughter function to elicit positive emotions from others with my broaden and build theory, with the idea of mirror neurons, and argues that, well, what a smile does is it broadens collective mindsets and builds collective resources. And to this I add, well, how about all of the above? We don't have to think about the function of a smile just from a smiler's perspective or from the recipient of that smile. We can think of it as a relational psychological state that creates this life-giving nutrient of positivity resonance, so that the smile is something that is going to join us together in ways that we then experience the same emotional state across two brains and bodies at once in ways that are fortifying the heart, affecting, improving cardiac vagal tone. We already have evidence of that. And potentially also improving our cellular health in terms of our gene expression profiles in the immune system. So I hope I've built the case that these micro moments of positivity resonance are potentially extraordinarily powerful psychological states. So much so that maybe they're the tiny engines that drive this larger phenomenon that we call love and link our social well-being to our physical well-being. And I had a chance to give a lecture like this at our university art museum and connect it to the exhibit that was a lot of conceptual art and a lot of what's called relational conceptual art. And there was an art historian who described those installations as creating day-to-day micro-utopias. And I thought this was a beautiful description of what these micro moments of positivity resonance are. We've kind of long given up the idea that there's a actual address on Earth that is a real utopia, because you move in someplace and there's going to be some ups and downs. But when you look at things from a momentary lens, you can find these micro-utopias, and they happen all the time. There are opportunities to connect with one another and share positive emotions are just abundant all day long. So I'd like to just close with one of my favorite quotes on love. Love doesn't just sit there like a stone. It has to be made, like bread, remade all the time, made new. So thank you for your attention. I'd be happy to take questions. Yes.
Hello, thank you. So much of the things you were discussing around love seem to be requiring, unless I misunderstood, more than one person. That is, a relational act between two or more people. And notwithstanding the mention of loving kindness meditation, where someone might be by themselves, right. I'm interested in your thoughts on the idea that someone can have or express love or whatever, just kind of walking around doing that.
Right,
That, regardless of whether they encounter another person,
right.
Or maybe even towards something that's not alive, or I should say not human or social, like a tree or something,
right.
or even a picture.
Right. No, for someone who really loves trees, I know what you mean. I think that we use the word love in so many different ways, and that's one of the difficulties in trying to do the science of this. Scientifically, what I'm arguing is that positivity resonance is its own thing, because when you're interacting with another person, they have the same biology and neural system as you do, and what you express can bloom on their face, and what blooms on their face can create more of an emotion in you. So it's a way in which there's a reverberation. Okay. You and a tree, a little different. You may have a good feeling, and it could be a warmth and a sense of connection, a sense of peace, and those are all really important positive emotional states that also do a body good, but they may not have that reverberation potential. And that's what I think is potentially why socially shared positive emotions have a larger effect on health. Now, this is just the beginning of a research program on this. There's a whole lot more work needs to be done to be able to show that those are physically and psychologically more potent states. This is just suggestive work. So science is never done. So over here.
Thank you so much for your work. Very powerful and very important for the world.
Thank you.
My question is about a slide you had a few moments ago, the loving kindness, producing more positive emotion, producing more positivity resonance, producing increased cardiac tone. And if I understood you correctly, it sounded like you had concluded that the positivity resonance was what was producing greater cardiac tone, as opposed to positive emotion alone.
Right.
So I'm curious about what the difference is. And
Yeah.
maybe it's what you just said, but
Well,
answer to this other fellow.
Statistically, we're able to play around with the ordering of those variables in that statistical model. And if we flip the order, the model fit isn't as good. So that's one of the things that tells me that the warm, attuned social experiences are the most directly related to the health improvement, especially in the cardiac vagal tone. And then the work where we had people savor positivity resonance, and so we experimentally manipulate people's experiences of positivity resonance, or at least reflecting on them, and we're able to show that that's a causal that causes changes in vagal tone. So it's not just a correlational mediator, it's a causal mediator. So those are kind of things that build up. I mean, in this kind of work, you kind of get little evidence from here, little evidence from here, little evidence from here. And so we're able to see those more positive connections in daily life as a driving variable. So it's not like we can rule out that it's potentially positive emotions themselves, but the evidence is pushing us more to seeing the greater feelings of social connection as the most direct link to the health benefit. And we're seeing that in some of our other work as well with the gene expression early stuff there.
Yeah, I look forward to that coming out.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Good question. I'll go back and forth.
So, again, thanks for coming to Stanford. I'm wondering, with the digital natives wiring their brains so closely to social media, and social media keeping each of them expressing these artificial highs, so to speak. And yet studies starting to say, it's not healthy for them to be on this. What do you see in that for the future for this new generation?
I have the same concern. I think I need to be away from that speaker. I have the same concern. It got me to write a New York Times op-ed last spring that the editors gave this lovely title to, which was "Your Phone versus Your Heart." And this upward spiral dynamic between cardiac vagal tone and positivity resonance, it's a spiral dynamic, but spirals can go down too. So if you have a lack of positive connection, that can diminish you. So we always hear we're wired to connect, right? But we think of that wiring as static, but there's plasticity in that. And our daily habits of connection are going to improve our ability to connect. Another way to say this is that your heart's capacity for connection, or your biological capacity to connection, obeys the law of use it or lose it. So when we're not exercising this, we're atrophying it, in a sense. This is a living tissue that's either going to bring us, improve our skills of connection, or erode them. So that's where I think, social media is here to stay. We just have to be conscious of how we're using it, and are we using it to get us into more of these face-to-face micro moments, to schedule more efficiently so that we can be with other people, or are we using it as a barrier? And a lot of younger people, especially people with more social anxiety, will really like that edited self that they can create through social media, where you don't have to put your feelings out on the line. But where that may create a sense of safety, it may also come with some costs. And now, I don't know of any work that looks at cardiac vagal tone in people who have different social media uses. And one of my doctoral students is really interested in this, and so maybe in a couple of years I'll have an answer for you. Okay. Great question, though. Over here.
Hi there. Thanks for a great talk and for a fabulous book.
Oh.
I recommend everybody get 2 copies of this, one for yourself and one for your partner, so you can positively resonate when you read it together. So I got 2 questions. First one is, what do you think? What is it that mediates this physiological synchrony? I've heard that mirror neurons are involved, but then mirror neurons are becoming controversial. So what do you think is actually happening?
Well, I think that there's the little pieces that I showed you here. There's evidence that our biochemistries come into sync with oxytocin. Little surges in oxytocin may be part of this that help us orient toward each other even more. There's work to show that when people have more of a trait empathy, when they're talking with their partner, they have synchronized heart rate variability changes. Whereas people with worse trait empathy, their spouse's heart rate variability is doing this and theirs is doing something totally different. So I think a number of these, and then the work on the neural synchrony, the sort of whole brain neural synchrony. I mean, not everywhere in the brain, but really widespread in Uri Hassan's work. And I think each of these little changes that brings us closer to feeling the same thing can just, again, it creates this, in a way, a hall of mirrors where your positive feeling and my positive feeling kind of build on one another for a while and then dissipate. So I don't think it's carried by one thing. I think it's carried by biochemistry, by heart rhythms, by neural synchrony, and potentially very affected by eye contact, too. So, or other ways of catching somebody else's emotion. It could be through touch. Decker Keltner's got some interesting earlier work on how we can tell what other people are feeling by through touch as well. So I'm not ruling out love for the blind. But.
And the second question was, a few months ago I heard about this company called Heart Math, and they have this gizmo called the M-Wave. What's your take on the effectiveness of it? Is it worth $400 to get something like that?
Yeah.
To
I don't do
improve
any.
your vagal tone.
Yeah. It's been a few years since I've tracked exactly what Heart Math is doing. Early on, they were very hush-hush about what their actual algorithm that they were using. And I don't know if that's changed. But they just considered it proprietary information. So it's hard for scientists to get in there and say, well, what are you doing? Is that the same thing as what we're doing in this research? Looks like it's the same, but who knows? It's hard to judge, so I can't make any product endorsements. So, sorry. Yes.
Hi, thanks for a great talk.
Thanks.
So, I was extra curious to ask you if you would be willing to help just add a little bit more specificity to the definition and range of positivity. I like the idea of broaden and build. Uh-huh. So broadening, positivity allows for more broadening. And I was wondering, listening, that probably not all positive emotions are equally impactful or useful.
Right.
So one thing that came to mind, for instance, is that we can have different affect regulation systems. So if we think about our soothing system connected with oxytocin, a vagal tone, and so forth, nurturing, attachment, that's one type of positivity that could emerge. Another one would be our drive system connected with dopaminergic reward systems and so forth, excitement, go, 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 go. And I imagine some positivity can emerge from people in that arena as well. So how do you kind of think about different types of positivity and which one should be going for? Or are there specific circumstances under which different types are more useful and so forth?
Yeah, great question. I got to stand away from that speaker, sorry. In my own work, I haven't found specific emotions to be connected to broadening more than others. We tend to, we've seen it across kind of high activation positive emotions and lower activation positive emotions. Now, Eddie Harmon-Jones and his team have argued that, kind of the appetitive positive emotions lead to narrowing, whereas, consuming, may be more broadening. Now, one of the things that I've wondered is whether we know that positive emotions are experienced in rich blends. They're not experienced as discrete as negative emotions. So when we're angry, we're more likely to just be angry and not also sad. But when we're joyful, we're likely to be grateful. And then I think as a chaser positive emotion on all positive emotions is contentment or serenity. So it's like you might have this exciting moment, you're really proud, and then afterwards you're like, that, and it could be that broadening happens in that serenity mode. And now I haven't, and that's just speculation, theoretical speculation. We've not been able to really look at, find a measure of broadening that would take us like, okay, let's measure it in this second, this second, this second. Broadening is kind of a subtle effect, hard to work with sometimes, and but it's reliable. It's a subtle effect and replicable, but it's hard to get it in that temporal refinement. But it's possible that it's just with that. That was a joyous experience, or I just felt really great about what I did. Now I'm sort of on the recovery side of that, and that could have a different positive emotional state, and that could be where the broadening is. So, does that help?
It helps some, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Over here.
Thanks again for the incredible talk. So many of my colleagues have asked excellent questions, but I have to ask, what role does culture play in terms of mediating the upward spiral?
Yeah.
In the Bay Area, we have a huge range of people coming from all over the place, and each one has, obviously, as you expressed, different perspectives on love, but it can be impacted distinctly by culture as well.
Right.
So I wanted to see if there's any work out there that had been done on either international or multinational or multicultural relationships.
Right. I think cultures vary a lot in what kinds of emotions they value and kind of have out there as ideal states that they want to be in. I'm thinking a lot of Jeannie Tsai's work, who's here at Stanford Psychology Department. And I think the kinds of work that I'm doing is really looking at, okay, if you feel this, how does the body respond? And there we're not finding gender cultural differences. Where we find big individual cultural and gender differences is people's interest in being in our studies. So we have, in North Carolina, we have, if you're a white woman, we have a lottery system for getting into our studies, and everybody else gets in right away. So actually the CompuWare study that we did, it was in a company that is 80% male, and our sample was 70% female. So again, we were in a context where there were tons of men who were being offered the study, but they didn't value that opportunity in the same way. So I think those are the places where the biggest cultural differences come in terms of what positive or what emotional states you're valuing and seeking out. And then kind of the flip side of that is once you're feeling a particular way, do you want to prolong it or do you want to make it go away because it makes you uncomfortable? So it's those values come in sort of in terms of behavioral selection and niche picking, and also in the how much people want to hang on to that emotional state versus avoid it. So I don't know of any good work connecting to love as positivity resonance that's across cultures. So
Great, thank you.
it's a good area to do a dissertation or two in, or supervise a few dissertations in. Yeah.
Great talk.
Thank you.
I'd say I'd love it, but that would be inaccurate.
We're loving it now.
My question, very simple. How does the love that you're speaking of relate to morality?
Yeah. If we see these micro moments of connection as ones that allow us to create these moments of mutual care, then that would be the action tendency that's associated with this, to have concern and have care for another person. And so I think the things that we put up as barriers to connection could potentially be also viewed as barriers to care, barriers to have concern. you kind of orchestrate your life so that you don't connect with certain people so that you don't have to care. So that might be one way to connect it to morality, that it's hard to be completely disregarding of others if you've shared a connection in some way. But so you could look at the ways we organize our societies and cultures as ways that either promote people having these experiences and caring for one another, or maybe decidedly separate. So I think that's another great area for a few dissertations. So.
Thank you for sharing your work, and more importantly, for doing this work. What I was curious about was you, in one of your definitions, said the relationship science view was love is investment in the well-being of others. And investment has a connotation of putting time, energy, resources, whatever else, over time.
Right.
So what I was curious about was, have you looked at what is the physiology of action at a societal level in this model when the micro moment of resonance is basically what you think creates benefit for me. So I'm taking the benefit in that moment, but then what's to stop me later on at night to go watch Breaking Bad instead of doing something? So I don't know if you've sort of, clearly there's benefit to me, I've sort of, from personal experience, from meditation, et cetera, I can tell that.
Right.
But what's at the societal level the physiology of action?
Well, if I think you tell me if I'm not understanding your question the way you intended. I think that there are clear benefits in the moment of experiencing these micro moments of connection, but a steady diet of those changes people in enduring ways. Makes you physically healthier, probably builds up more of a trait, other focus, so that you have more empathy, have more concern. It certainly builds our social bonds, so that the people who you've connected with in this way end up being important to you. You want to be loyal to them and committed to them and invested in them. So I don't think it's a matter of just like this great buzz that you experience and you walk away and you're no different. It changes us. I mean, we can think of these micro moments of connection as kind of like the tiny engines that bond us to community, and build warmer social networks. So, did I get your question?
Yeah, so does it then mean that, okay, those actually micro moments build upon themselves and have sort of, a domino effect or a chain reaction?
Exactly. Like, eating great, well-prepared fruits and vegetables or fresh, what is not only enjoyable while you're eating them, it affects your physiology and your health long term. So it's that's the piece of this, what I said, what emotion science could add is the broaden and build theoretical backdrop, and what that means is that there are benefits in the moment and benefits long term. So that's, and in ways that these fleeting experiences end up changing who we are at a fundamental level, changing our network of care relationships and our bonds and loyalty. So, thanks.
Thank you for a great talk. One of your slides mentioned that that safety was a major role in this. Have you found that any of the interventions do help with someone who would be depressed?
Right.
Or that some might be more effective for that?
Yeah. I haven't worked yet with depression or social anxiety, although there's a collaboration that I'm hoping to forge that will allow us to go in that direction. But one area where we have done some pilot studies is with a more severe mental illness of schizophrenia. And there's a certain subtype of schizophrenia with what's called negative symptoms, where it's not so much of a problem of active psychosis, but a muting of being disconnected from social relationships, being affectively flat and hedonic, and not showing much ability to forecast what a good experience would be. And so the lives of people with these negative symptoms of schizophrenia are really kind of diminished and small. It's kind of a stay home on your couch and watch TV. And a colleague of mine at Carolina studies schizophrenia and saw some of my earlier work on this and saw especially that loving-kindness meditation was able to increase people's ability to savor positive future events, which is uniquely known to be kind of disrupted in schizophrenia. And so what we found is that loving-kindness meditation improves this negative symptom profile and was really well received by community residing patients with schizophrenia. So I think, given that it worked on this anhedonia, this inability to experience positive emotions, I think it could be potentially beneficial for certain subtypes of depression, perhaps in conjunction with other kinds of treatment as well. I think I know somebody who's working on the, is very interested in taking this in the direction of the social anxiety too. So I think there's some promise there. And I think it could be in conjunction with other approaches, kind of an add-on. So, good question. Hey.
Thank you for your work.
Oh,
I really appreciate your courageousness in doing this kind of work. It's a difficult path. I think your message was very clear that personally, the loving kindness meditation is obviously very helpful in savoring those positive moments so they don't just bounce off us. As a relationship coach and as a mom especially, I'm very curious to know, how do you engage another person in doing that kind of work to help them?
Right.
I mean, it's very easy to figure out how to make it work for a person of their own.
Yeah.
How do you bring in someone else into that positive social moment?
Yeah. Well, I think that, the way I think about loving kindness meditation as a practice is it's preparatory for experiencing micro moments of connection. And I actually think maybe the best interventions are ones that we don't try to do while we're interacting with people. If we think, oh, well, Synchrony's involved, I'll start mimicking your your gestures, and it just creates this really funny, this kind of needs to emerge. It needs to bloom like a flower all on its own. You're not going to force it. So loving kindness meditation as a practice, we have data on this, shows that people who have spent more time meditating in loving kindness experience their relationships at work as more positive and connected. So it is an intervention that works on relationships, but just indirectly. It may not be that you need to find a way to entice someone else to do loving kindness meditation too, because maybe they're not there yet, or it's not part of what they see for themselves. But the difference it makes in your openness to others is an intervention in itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Again, thank you for your work and for presenting it in such a clear and compelling way. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Forgive me, but I'm interested in a small and perhaps tangential aspect of it, particularly the facial mimicry. And I'm wondering if you have observed differing abilities in facial mimicry. You mentioned love for the blind, you know. How good are blind people at facial mimicry? Is it innate in that way? Myself, I suffer from or have prosopagnosia, face blindness. People who grow up in cultures without mirrors or cameras.
Right.
Is there a spectrum of ability to mimic facial expressions, and is there a correlation between that and this positive resonance that you're talking about?
Right. That's beyond the current areas of science. So those are, again, great questions for future work. I do know that I think there would be potential for mimicry, maybe not focus so much on having seen a face and mimicking that way, but emotions are broadcast through so many channels. You can tell what somebody is feeling a bit through their voice, a bit through their actions and how they're moving through the world, and a bit through the face. And so any one of those could cause a mimicry. So I wouldn't think it's ruled out, but I don't know of any good evidence that shows, that yes, this is how it works in people with this disorder. So, but I think that mimicry can happen at so many levels. It could happen in, one of the things that I think is fascinating, I have a collaboration with a kinesiologist, and we've looked at body comportment with emotions. And one thing that is true for positive emotions, again, higher activation ones like excitement and lower activation ones like serenity, is that people's torsos expand when they're experiencing positive emotions. So, the mind expands and the chest cavity expands. And so maybe that's something that is picked up and mimicked, that sense of safety that comes from kind of an open posture versus a closed posture. So that can be mimicked and caught. And I think so there could be a resonance that starts through synchrony of postures. So I don't think that, I think there's really powerful work with eye contact, but that shouldn't get us to think that everything goes through eye contact and face. So, good question. Thanks.
Hi. Welcome back to Stanford.
Oh, thank you.
And I apologize if you covered this while I was with the homecoming traffic. But I'm wondering about what do you see as the special characteristics of loving kindness meditation as opposed to all the other kinds of meditation that account for some of the power that you're...
Well, I think that loving kindness meditation, and we have some early evidence on this, it's easier to do in many ways for novices. So if we take novices and we give them an experience of mindfulness meditation, experience of loving kindness meditation feels easier because it's, I think in part because it's phrase-based as opposed to keep returning to the breath or, whatever the focal object is. And especially for novices, and that's all of our studies are done with novice meditators, none with experienced meditators. Especially for novices, the mindfulness can often feel like a bunch of mistakes. Oh, my mind is wandering again. And so, obviously that's what you're working with, but the experience of it is, I messed up, I messed up, I messed up. And with loving kindness meditation, there's a little bit less of that because you have a bigger anchor with the phrases. And so it's a little less, I think, frequent that people feel like they are in error. They did it wrong. And I think that the enjoyment of it, the fact that it can create, that your aim is to cultivate warm and tender feelings, not in a heavy-handed way, but to set an intention to warm up your heart and soften your heart, the fact that feels good entices people back to try it again. And what we find is that when we do, 6-week workshop, teach people mindfulness meditation, teach them loving kindness meditation with really effective teachers, they really love their teachers, they feel really satisfied with the workshop. The people who are in the loving kindness meditation workshop, behaviorally, they have practiced more. Across 2 months, they have 7 more days of meditation. So they're choosing how often they meditate themselves. So I think, and we have yet to piece this all together, I think it's because it feels good. And so that makes you go back and practice and create new habits. So it may be a better gateway practice, a better first meditation practice for many people. So.
What's the time period that they're practicing that loving kindness meditation?
In our studies, because I felt like people would be hard-pressed to find an hour, which is what MBSR sometimes asks people to find an hour a day. We had meditations that were 15 minutes, and we asked people to meditate every day, and they didn't. They meditated 3-4 times a week, so about an hour a week they were devoting to this, so it's not very much. So, yeah. Okay, yeah.
So we're going to have to end. So please give a warm round of applause, and thank you so much, Barbara.